Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? It's me, Mr. 4K Upscaler. On this video, I'm going to talk about a little bit HDR and the difference between different types of HDR. So I'm pretty sure most of you know how HDR 10 works. Okay, it's a static metadata that it's coded to a certain Rec 709 and 1000 peak brightness. Some TVs they have that 1000 peak brightness, and quantum dot technology with quantum nanocells, which gives a full spectrum of wide color gamut that's needed for HDR, and then that 1000 peak brightness nits. Now, Samsung KS8000 has both. This is why it has that Ultra HD Premium badge, meaning it's fully fledged, fully compatible HDR10 certified television, meaning you're going to get the best possible picture quality on the HDR10 via Samsung KS8000. Okay, this TV has a standard which is about 700 nits, which is standard needed for you to achieve HDR10 with a 10-bit panel. It is a 10-bit panel, but it has 700 nits, same amount of nits as OLED. But having said that, just because it has 700 nits, which is the standard, doesn't mean the HDR, it doesn't mean you're not going to see the HDR. You will still see the HDR, you will notice the HDR, okay? Depends on how well that TV is going to process that static metadata, all right? This TV has a local dimming, which adds to the deep dark levels and helps a little bit. But however, it doesn't have that peak brightness needed to achieve that detail of HDR. For example, if you like the peak brightness, for example, like right here. Here, let me show you one example. All right, right now we're in like very dark area. So hold on, let me just adjust my low light. Okay, we're kind of like in the dark area. So here the peak brightness is going to drop down. It's not going to be 700. It's probably going to be like fluctuating to like maybe 600 to even 500. Well, now as soon as we like go back over here, turn around, go in reverse, go back over here. Now the peak brightness is going to go a little bit higher. But let's hold on. Let's actually exit the vehicle. Like for example, right here, what I'm trying to say, it depends. Like the way HDR works, it depends on the environment. This TV only has, like I said, 700, but it's not always going to be 700 constant nits. It's going to drop down to 600 to 500 depending on what type of a scene. Now here, if we look up here on the trees, then we'll get a little bit more of that peak brightness because the sun, it's overshadowing through the branches and the trees. Okay. So, but it also depends on how well the developers of this game, how well did they implement that HDR. Okay. Some developers, they just implement that metadata and have the TV do the works. They don't actually. Checkerboarding HDR is the best. Here's the reason why I prefer checkerboarding HDR rendering, because what checkerboarding does, it renders it in 3D, all of the elements in 3D. So therefore, if you are playing a checkerboard HDR, and one example of that, it's Ratchet and Clank. That checkerboard HDR. And another one is a good example. Hold on, not Ratchet and Clank. I'm sorry. The great example of HDR is Horizon Zero Dawn, because it's checkerboard, and then when you checkerboarding resolution, then you are applying 3D elements into it. You're rendering the 3D aspect of it. Everything you see here is going to be rendered in that 3D resolution. Therefore, the HDR will have much better effect on it. Okay, I don't mean to go too much into technical jargon here, but my whole point of this video here is just to tell people that the way HDR works, it depends on the content you're watching. It depends on two things. What type of TV do you have? And what type of HDR content are you watching and are you playing? Obviously, if you have Z90, you're definitely going to enjoy the quality of this game on HDR on a Z90 due to more local dimming zones, higher peak brightness, much better processor that's built into it. All of these elements will help give you that best looking HDR. Same thing if you have an A1 OLED with its Bravia processing chip that it has on there, or whether you have C7 or B7 or E7 from LG, you will notice that difference as well. But let's be fair, okay? This is a $600 budget 4K HDR Dolby Vision TV. I was able to get it for $500. So I personally, when I went in buying this TV, I didn't expect to have super sonic, super high-end HDR detail. I didn't expect that, but I was still blown away by that 700 nits, especially on Dolby Vision. Power Rangers. I was watching Power Rangers on Dolby Vision. It looked fantastic. So you have to be realistic on what your expectations should be. If you go to ratings.com, if you go to Digital Trends, they're going to tell you the same thing. Your expectations of a $500, $600 TV shouldn't be like expectations of $3,000 TV. If you pay a $3,000 for a TV, well, you damn well better expect some super eye candy detail there. You should, because you're paying top dollar for that. But for a budget TV, this is still a good HDR. This is think of it like an entry-level HDR. As you can see, the reflection here, it's represented really good naturally, okay? As you can see right here on HDR, the reflection of the water here, it's represented very naturally, and this is good for an HDR. Now, you will have to tweak a couple of things, obviously. Here's what you have to look for when you are running an HDR mode. This is what you have to look for, people. Where it says picture mode for HDR, and it clearly says right here, the bright HDR gives more vivid colors, and that's what you want. If you switch to a normal HDR, it slightly boosts the colors, so you're losing the colors. You see how much colors you get when you switch to bright HDR? Here, actually, I'll give you that example. Keep an eye here. Keep an eye here where my finger is on the reflection of that branches of the trees. And look how much the green you get when you go to the bright HDR. And look how much green you lose when you switch to normal HDR. Look at this. Bright. Actually, let me bring my camera closer so I can show you. Okay, keep looking here. And look how much green you just lost. Now you got. Now you lost. But the best way for you to see it is if I move it away. Look, I have to move it away for you to see it properly. Like this, here. And look. Brighter. Normal. Hold on, this is actually, I'm sorry. This is my brightness. This is what you have to look for. I'm sorry. The bright HDR. So let me come here, bright HDR. And keep an eye here on the green, right here on the green. You see how much color you just lost? And look how much you got. Keep an eye on my finger right here. Now it's bleak. Now there's more color. It even says you here, when you use this HDR mode, you will get more color popping. If you go brighter, if you go dark, you're going to lose. If you go bright, you will get more color. And that's what the bright HDR does. It gives you that vivid detail of colors. And this is why I always keep my HDR mode on the brightest. Okay. And here, I can do that again here. Let me show you. This is bright HDR, and look how much color you have now here. And look at this. when I switch to normal. It's bleak. It looks bleak. It's not good. And look how much color you get. Same thing here. Look. You see how much color right next to her you get? On the reflection of the tree? Green, more green. Even here on the car, you can see it. Well, there, you guys get the point. So, you do have to calibrate your TV. You do have to go tweak things out. And this is why I tell people, this is why I leave the bright HDR mode. Whether it's a Dolby Vision or HDR, I always keep the bright HDR on the bright HDR mode. And of course, the TV brightness, I keep it on bright. If you are in a very lit up room, then you want to keep it on the brighter. If you're not in a very lit up room, you want to keep it on the bright. So there's so many different things that comes into achieving a good HDR. Obviously, you have to calibrate it. This is why I do this. This is why I have this channel. This is why I go through these calibrating processes to achieve the best possible HDR. And this is why I always tell people it is hard and almost impossible to have universal calibrating setup. You could have calibrating standard setup, but that doesn't mean that every content's going to look good. It doesn't mean that every movie, every game's going to look good, because every game is different. Every movie is different. Every content is different. Everything is different. And this is why you have this option to calibrate. And I use my own two eyes because who better to calibrate your TV than your own two eyes? But you have to also have some knowledge. You have to know how much color do you need. You don't want to oversaturate your colors. You don't want to destroy your deep dark levels. You don't want to screw up your white balance. You don't want to crush your white bright levels. You got to know how much sharpness do you need. You don't want to outline your sharpness so it looks ridiculous. You do have to have a little bit of knowledge so you can kind of work around the standard of the calibrating process, but still your two eyes will be the best detectors. Okay? That'll be like a satellite that's rotating around our planet. The satellite has the best picture of what's going on. Whether it's tracking that hurricane or it's tracking this or tracking that, it has the best possible visuals to tell you exactly what's going on. It can detect the temperature. It can detect the upper pressure, lower pressure. So it's the same thing with your two eyes. Your two eyes will analyze the best. Your two retinas that you have will be able to analyze this in the best possible way. The equipment cannot analyze that. You can only detect the Rec 709 and the peak brightness and the white color gamut of the TV of full RGB. And it's going to let you know that you need to stay within the standard. But that doesn't mean if you calibrate it by that standard, that's going to look the best for this game. So hopefully this kind of clarifies a couple of things. Here we can do this example right here for hold on, actually oops. Let's go over here. Like right here. Here's a good example of that. Maybe if here we go. Just look how much green we have here. Look at this. And then look right here. When I switch to a normal HDR, look at that. Look just how much color you lost there. And look how much you got. So this is very important. The bright HDR mode is very important. That's where the trick comes in. So leave it always on bright HDR. You see? See how much color you get? All right. And here, let me show you another thing too. Local dimming, you never want to mess with this. The whole point that you have this TV is because of the local dimming zones. So you always want to keep the local dimming at high. So this should always be at high. You should never mess with this. Dynamic contrast, you don't want that because you'll be playing HDR most of the time. You don't need that. Okay, because you're going to be crushing your white bright levels. You don't need this. Backlit obviously has to be maximum. Contrast has to be maximum so you can take the advantage of the HDR. Peak brightness nits. Brightness, you want to leave it at 50 because if you go below 50, you're going to crush your deep dark level details. Sharpness, I chose 0 because I honestly believe that it's better when you have sharpness at 0, so that way you have that smooth outline. So it's kind of like an anti-aliasing, smooth outline, so you don't see those jagged edged lines, all right? Color, I choose to go with a 70. I wanted this game to pop a little bit more with the color because it's a very adventurous nature type of a game, so you definitely want a little bit more of that color. So I left it at 70 here, okay, which is right here, 70. And then when it comes to color temperature, I like to keep it on a normal. That's my highest recommendation for the tone of the temperature, because normal gives you that balance between blue, cold tone, and then yellow, orange, sepia, warm, very warm tone of the color. So the normal stays in between the two and gives you a good representation of red, green, and blue. So you get a good tone of color. So there you have it, guys. Like I said, when it comes to HDR, it will depend on a couple of things. It will depend on what type of TV do you have, what type of TV you're watching it on. And number two, what are your calibration settings? Okay. And then number three, it also depends on what type of game it is, what type of content, how well is the HDR rendered on this game. Okay. But the key factor is obviously TV. Like, if you have a high-end TV that has like over 1,000 peak brightness nits and full spectrum of wide color gamut that goes above the standard, then yeah, the experience of that static metadata will be much, much better, obviously, and especially if it's an OLED TV or if it's a Z9D that has an excellent local dimming and a great processing upscaler and great processing chip that renders that 4K and static metadata, then yeah, you will have that much better HDR experience. But this is a budget TV. We got to be fair what it is. Don't expect them to invest $3,000 or even more on a TV that's going to cost $600. Okay, so we have to be reasonable about that. But this is pretty darn good for honestly, for a $600 TV. You're definitely getting a good entry level taste of what HDR is about, and also what Dolby Vision is about. And you're getting a really nice deep dark levels with 700 peak brightness nit. Now, these deep dark levels are not going to be OLED. All right, OLED, it's the best there is because OLED doesn't have, when it comes to deep dark levels, OLED doesn't have any kind of backlit light. There are no backlit LEDs. There's nothing behind. There's no LCD panel. There's no backlit. There's no local dimming zones in there. You just have one flat surface of organic light emitting diodes, okay, or diodes, whatever you want to call them, okay. You have that organic light of diodes there, right there, very thin. The bezel could be as thin as you wanted it to be, like a paper thin. And right there, of course, you're going to have much better deep dark levels with a peak brightness of 700 nits and, of course, much wider spectrum of colors. So yes, there the HDR will look better on this game. But that we're talking about $3,000 TV. We're talking about a higher price point now. We're stepping into a high-end premium. Okay, this is not a high-end premium. This is just like a entry-level HDR Dolby Vision type of a TV. So hopefully this kind of clarifies a couple of things about HDR. Look, all of this stuff you can learn via Google. Google is your friend. I know I'm not the first person to say that, but Google is your friend. You can learn about this. You can get better understanding, but you also have to be honest with yourself as well. You got to ask yourself, hey, man, what should I expect from this TV? Well, you should expect exactly what you paid for, and that's the entry level, you know. But it's still the reason I give it a good score on this TV, because for entry level, for the price, this is pretty darn good for this kind of a price of a TV. You know, you're not gonna find this kind of features for $500 and any other TVs out there. You're just not gonna. You're gonna find 72 local dimming zones. You're not gonna find Dolby Vision. You're not gonna find HDR10, and you sure as heck not gonna find Roku with so many apps on there available. And also you get 3 HDMI 2.0, 2.2 HDCP. So they're all 2.0 high-speed HDMIs, all 3 of them. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully this video kind of clarifies some confusion that some people might have about HDR and what to expect from HDR on different types of televisions and different types of content. So there you have it. I think I did my best here trying to explain that. There you have it, guys. Have a good one, though. Take care. I'll see you in the next video.